Okay, we did it. This is our first time going live on Facebook as well for Real Talk with One Elephant. So thank you all so much for joining us on both platforms. And this is great. So if you do need to rewatch our episode after the 24-hour period on Instagram, you can always go to the Facebook page to check it out. So that's great. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you all.
Hi.
So we
everybody, not just the got it.
So we are going to be continuing our discussion from last time on digestion. We all, I think, really enjoyed our conversation and just kind of want to continue to take it wherever it's going to go. And we got quite a few questions prior to today that we're going to try to get to, but there's a ton of them. One, or actually a few of them, revolving around poop. So we are going to start by talking about our bowels. Again, one of our favorite topics. And we'll start by kind of taking this to Dr. Lewis. One of the common questions that we got was about how often we should be having BMs and the consistency of your BMs and what that tells you.
That is a great question, and one that I actually get often. It's funny because Noreen, you and I talk a lot about digestion with our patients. And initially, when we ask our patients the very broad question of, so tell me about your digestion, people are really nervous and they're really shy to kind of get into it. And then once we get into it and we, talk about the simple things like bloating and gassiness and stuff like that, and we eventually get to bowel movements, people end up like just really opening up, and then tons of questions come up, like this question of what's normal in terms of consistency, how often should I be going, how much is too much, all of that kind of stuff. So I think the theme probably of today's is going to end up being something along the lines of myth busting for, what's normal, what's not normal, what to do, who to ask, that kind of thing. So when it comes to bowel movement, in terms of frequency, ideally we want people at least emptying their bowels once a day. For some people, that is like a true win because they may not be emptying their bowels every day, but ideally we are putting food into our bellies on a regular basis, and we don't want to just be holding on to that and keeping that in our bodies for an extended period of time. So ideally once daily, but in a perfect world, you're actually emptying your bowels after every meal. So we know that that is not always attained, but ideally we are emptying every time we are reintroducing new matter in the way of our nutrition and our diet into our meals.
Now, it's funny you said that because I'm actually thinking about my own movements and trying to figure out where on the spectrum I am. And I am very happy to say I'm on the very happy side of this conversation. But my question about that is what are some factors that would force people, not force, that's a horrible word to use right now, but what would cause people to only have one bowel movement a day versus having one right after every single meal? Like what is it?
You want to take it, Noreen?
Sorry, I'm just monitoring the Facebook Live. Can you repeat the question?
What are some of the factors that play into how many bowel movements we're having? So why are some people having a bowel movement once a day versus some people that'll have a bowel movement right after every single meal?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things that come into play there, and Dr. Lewis, you can chime in whenever you need to, but a lot of us think that if we have a bowel movement right after a meal, that's our meal coming out, right? So it's kind of like, why is my meal coming out right after I eat it? And that's not the case. It's kind of helping things move along. So you're eliminating what you've eaten probably, more than just the meal before it. So it's been kind of a few hours of processing. Transit time is something that really differs between each person. So you might have a slower transit time, in which case you're having a bowel movement once a day. And it's difficult to say whether that's not normal for you or not. I think it all depends on the most important thing is that you're having at least one bowel movement a day, but each person's system is going to respond very differently to the way that foods are actually traveling through their intestines and moving through. So one could be completely normal to have it once a day, another could be totally normal having it 5 times a day. The most important thing is what you're looking for in that poop. So again, we're always, when we dive into this conversation with patients, it's a little bit strange to them that we are asking for some serious detail, right? If someone says, oh, I poop just fine, that's not enough. I want to know the color. I want to know what's in it. I want to know how long it is. I want to know if it comes out in 1 piece or 30 pieces. We need to get all of that information to get a sense of what's happening in the system before it actually comes out, because that's where you'll get a better insight into the health of your gut.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the main thing that you said right up front, Noreen, around the kind of misconception that when I've eaten something, why is that food coming out right away, is definitely a common one that we get. And essentially what's happening when you introduce new food into the digestive tract is it acts as a stimulus for things to start to move. So it allows for your bowel movements or your intestines or your bowels to actually start to contract and move the previous meals or meal along into the next part of the digestive tract, right? So it really then forces digestive processing to occur, and you want to ensure that that ideally is happening where you are actually emptying as frequently as possible, but you don't want to be having bowel movements, 5, 6, 7 times a day. And as Noreen mentioned, we really want to think about consistency as well. And when I say consistency, I mean the actual consistency of the stool. So, we don't want to see loose or watery stool. That typically is going to come along with more of a fast transit where food is actually moving through the digestive system way too quickly for adequate absorption of the nutrients that you would want, right? We need to actually have some time spent in the digestive system for adequate absorption of the nutrients that we need and why we're presumably eating that food, right? Maybe sometimes we eat for other reasons besides nutrition, but anyway, that's a side topic. So we don't want things to move too quickly through where we end up not absorbing the nutrients or even water from the food that we're consuming, causing our stool to then be more loose or more watery. Nor do we want things to be sitting in there for a few days, which might then cause the stool to be really hard and not have a ton of water content within it at all left over, right? So it's hard to pass, small pebbles. That's what we generally tend to see with more of a constipated type of stool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And both of those have to do with, we talk about fiber a lot and fiber being so important in regular bowel movements, but there's different types of fiber, and each of those different types, the soluble, the insoluble, will play different roles in those different types of stool. So we need it to either bulk the stool and give you more volume. If it's too loose, right, you need a little bit more content, or you want it to actually pass easily if it's hard and not coming out too easily. And each type of fiber can actually help with either part of those. So that spectrum of almost diarrhea to constipation has such different treatment methods that are very much kind of, their nutrition definitely related, but there's so many other factors that you want to look into. And just one thing, because this is my favorite thing to talk about too, that I have to mention if people don't know about it already, is a Bristol stool chart. So if you haven't looked at poop, then this is my favorite thing to do with children who don't want to talk about it with me. So we just take out the picture of the Bristol stool chart and you get to point to which type of poop is your poop. I would encourage everybody to do that because I've had a few people say, oh, I think my stool is loose, right? They'll describe it as loose. And then we'll go into the picture of the stool chart, which is essentially types 1 through 7, which is constipation to diarrhea, is essentially the spectrum. And they actually point to one of the more normal types of poop. So a very fully formed, easily passed stool. So it's not watery, it's not on the end of diarrhea, it's actually quite formed. And to them, that's actually not normal. They think it's not normal. But they're noticing that with more fiber in their diet or different differences in their lifestyle, that their bowel movements have changed, and they've actually changed for the better. It's just that that's unknown at this point, and they need to be kind of, it's nice to see what the spectrum is and see where you fall on it.
So one question that just popped into my head, and I'm sure people have thought about this, is why do some foods run through our system much quicker than other foods? So I'm thinking like pizza or McDonald's, like those tend to, you know, increase your sprint versus like having just like pasta or chicken or salad or something like that. Who wants to take that on?
I'll be honest, I think it can depend, right? So if it's something like McDonald's where it's very highly processed food, it's also very greasy, and it lacks really any sort of substance that is going to travel slower and kind of create bulk, right? So you might find that passes through quicker, and it could also kind of impact, it can be buoyant. Again, not to get too not to get too detailed here, but if it's extremely fatty stool or there's a lot of air in it, it will actually float almost. So and those are actually more the stools that I see more common with foods that are like that, like very like fast food, highly processed, does not have a lot of nutritional density to it. You'll see them sort of pass right through and not have a lot to them necessarily. And that can be sort of almost you're not really digesting fully. It's what Dr. Lewis just mentioned, that it's going through almost too quickly. That's a note to you that you need to think twice about what was it that you just ate that didn't respond well. Because I think most of us can say, especially somebody who does have a little bit more of an irritable bowel, that their system will respond very differently to a meal like that versus a different type of meal that is less processed and has a little bit more to it. That would be my take on it. I haven't really dove into the difference, but just kind of putting 2 and 2 together with what the components of a meal are, that would be my take.
Awesome. Okay, let's switch gears from a little bit of poop talk to more, hi Raider, talk about posture. So Robin, we ended this conversation last time talking about posture, and for our manual care therapists, so myself, Joe, and Robin, what are your thoughts on this? Like, I mean, when I get this in my office, I tend to refer out a lot. I do talk about posture, but I haven't really thought of posture from a digestion standpoint. So what have you guys been seeing? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, just off the top of my head, a lot of discussion around posture and how it relates to how things are going to be able to function structurally. A lot of it comes down to, and I'm sure Joe will agree, pelvic floor mobility, as well as hip mobility, the awareness as well. Really, really, really important to have that awareness of where your body is in relation to one another. A lot of people don't even realize their posture is the way it is until they see a picture of themselves and they're like, oh my God, why am I standing like that? You know? A lot of, like I said, and I mentioned last time, it's quite common for women to have kind of more of a closed posture, kind of making themselves smaller to conceal their chest, especially if they're a little bit more self-conscious about that area. Same goes for their abdominal area as well. And what that does is it affects a lot of things. It affects the ability to activate your diaphragm properly. It affects the ability for you to really get proper contractions, like, you know, like we were talking about poop talk before. You know, when you're going to try and pass a stool, especially if it's one that's a little bit more difficult, if you don't have that core activation and that structural alignment to know how to contract the way you need to do to pass that stool without hurting yourself, that's another thing that comes into play. So, you know, one of my favorite moves, and I love, I'm going to put a little plug here. There's a YouTuber I really like to use for myself, Yoga with Adrienne. And there's one particular video, not super long, it's like 10 or 15 minutes long maybe. But she does this great sequence that helps that gets the body moving in such a way to aid digestion. So gas relief poses if you're feeling a lot of gas pressure or constipation, movements that involve kind of pivoting the thorax around the hips to kind of get things moving, mobilizing the ribs a little bit. So things like that are things that I discuss with patients when they have digestive concerns, and if there's postural alignment issues in play there, that really seems to have some positive effects.
That's great.
I think with like, just to jump on what you said, and pelvic floor does have a huge role to play on this as well, just because what it helps to actually stabilize and actually hold up the rectum. So if we actually take a look at this, hopefully you guys can see it.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's the pubic bone, and that's the tailbone.
Yep.
So this over here, this is your vaginal opening, and this is your rectal opening. So these muscles right across over here, those are all your pelvic floor muscles. So the tone of this can also cause a little bit of issues with how you pass bowel movements through your rectum. So if your pelvic floor is tight or if it's lengthened and weak, that can actually cause a difference in how you are passing bowel movements. So some people may be constipated, but it's not because of what they're eating or what they're doing, but it's because of their pelvic floor integrity.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to take a look at the rectum over here.
Yeah, so much fun.
Oh, all of your fun toys.
So like if we were to put it over here.
How?
Oh.
You guys see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if this was to be kinked in any way because the pelvic floor is supporting it, this means that the bowel or the poop won't be able to flow through it as well as it ought to. So in order to increase the success of this occurring, we want to be able to, first of all, test out the pelvic floor integrity and then either strengthen or relax and stretch out the pelvic floor in order to get that moving a little bit more. Mm-hmm. At the same time, Dr. Lewis, you talked about like the movement through the transverse colon and then down towards the descending colon. And sometimes that movement doesn't occur the way that it needs to for some reason. Stress does play a huge factor in it. If you're not breathing diaphragmatically, that can also play a huge impact on it. So we really want to be able to increase that successful movement. So sometimes with people who are experiencing constipation, and we have ruled out anything that's coming in digestive-wise, after I've referred them to either Noreen or Elaine, then I would start to do an I Love You massage. So this is a massage that helps to kind of move the poop through the system in a way that actually feels pretty good, and it's really, really relaxing. So this is a balloon.
Yes.
I love this.
This is the pelvic floor. So let's say this is like your ascending, transverse, descending colon. So this is where everything is going to pass through. We're going to ask you to just do like a little bit of a massage, lying down on your back, going up, across, down, and you're going to go straight in. So you can also do this on your side as well, and that will help to kind of move things through. And then I would always recommend patients in terms of posture in order to use a squatty potty. So this is a device that actually helps to elevate your hip and your pelvis so your knees are slightly up, higher than your pelvis. And that allows gravity to do its job, and it tilts your rectum a little bit more in order to pass poop through easier. So, yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Joe, actually? Because it's really cool that you brought up the squatty potty, because that was a huge thing for a while in terms of like videos that were around online of people getting them and stuff. And I thought it was really fascinating because they talk about how, you know, our ancestors, or even some people still now today, that when they go to the bathroom, they literally just, for lack of a better phrase, pop a squat. So, you know, is that how we're meant to be doing it? You know, anatomically, is it better for us to be at that angle?
Anatomically, it is advantageous for us to be at that angle because gravity helps to push that along a little bit more. If we are in a position where our knees are lower than our hips, then it just means that it's fighting a little bit harder in order to get through the system.
Yeah, it's actually a great point, Robin. Like I find in the mornings in my workout classes that, you know, there's a handful of people that have to go to the bathroom like 10 minutes into our warm up. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I know why you're going to the bathroom now, right? On that note, Joe, I was actually working, Sam and I used to work at this place where we did a ton of work with like therapies with individuals with dual diagnoses. And one of the like mini qualitative, not qualitative, like a QI quality assurance study that I was doing was essentially looking at abdominal massage in individuals with constipation. And this, like, I remember this study, but it didn't come up to my mind last week. It just came up when we were talking about this right now. And what we did was we tracked bowel movements for 6 months on this one particular individual, did abdominal massage, and then we tracked bowel movements thereafter. And it was night and day. So we were having one bowel movement every 2 to 3 days. A lot of abdominal distension, a lot of constipation, bloating, you know, the stuff that comes along with it. And then the abdominal massage, just like you said, the I love you stuff, it ended up, you know, making a huge difference. So thanks for bringing that up. That was awesome. And now we're obviously going to come full circle. So we've talked about food, digestion, muscles, movement, etc. And Joe and Robin both brought up stress being a component of digestion, right? Or working on progressive relaxation, etc. So, you know, that's in the wheelhouse of our two amazing psychotherapists that are on right now. And I will pass the torch off to you two.
Go ahead, Crystal.
To be honest, my internet is rather spotty, so a lot of what you're saying is like in and out. I totally missed the diagram with your balloon, Joe. I'm so sad. When it came in, you were done, but I'm getting the gist of it from what Yod was talking about. And actually, just to add on to what you were saying, Yod, like the, you know, massaging your stomach and things like that, and doing abdominal massages. Like that's what I used to do with my kids when they were suffering from constipation or bowel issues, or even putting them in like a warm bath, right, to relax their bodies. So we have to remember that we do all these things with our kids, with young children who are experiencing those challenges, so we can use it as adults as well. In terms of stress, so yeah, stress came up in my head a few times. Yad, before you asked, what are some factors that may be contributing to, you know, bowel movement, whether you're going too soon or not as frequent. And of course, stress is related to that. Our gut and our brain are totally connected. Our gut system is directly connected to our central nervous system, which is made up of our brain and our spinal column, right? So any sort of emotions that you have, intense emotions like sadness or anger or whatever it may be, is going to impact your digestive system. It's going to either stimulate it too much or result in a lack of stimulation. So you may notice that you're going very often or you're not going enough to the bathroom because of high levels of these emotions, specifically stress. Another thing to remember is that stress impacts things like our inflammation, right? It impacts our body's ability to start up that whole contraction system that you were talking about, Dr. Lewis, kind of pushing food along. It impacts that. It also impacts the release of the enzymes that are going to break down the food that you're consuming. It's all interconnected. It's all part of this beautiful system of our body. So our emotions, our thoughts, they will impact how our digestive system can work. Remember that we have our stress, our fight or flight response. And stress will activate that fight or flight response. And that fight or flight response is linked to our digestion, right? When we activate that fight or flight response, it's our body telling us that you need energy to deal with something that's going on in your environment right now. And in order to conserve energy, what it does is it slows down our digestion, right? It shuts down that system altogether. So when people are really stressed out or really nervous, what they notice oftentimes is that they don't want to eat. And that's because their digestion literally shut itself down, because it's saying something's going on. We don't have energy to waste on breaking down food. You need to deal with the stress in your environment right now. So we need to tap into what's going on in our environment. What are our stress levels? Manage that, because it will impact your digestive system. And then it can go flip side. It can like cause other people to increase their digestion, right? Because their body's using up so much energy because they're stressed out. So now they're going to be consuming more food. So it can go both ways, but clearly there's a connection between our stress and our emotions and how it's impacting our digestion.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I believe, I don't want to quote, but I know with stress, you know, we may use food as a way to cope, right? So we feel good when we eat in that moment, in that particular moment. But if you were to break down what the body actually needs in terms of calories from that, let's say junk food, it's not a lot. So if you take like a row of Oreos, to me, happiness is at the end of the entire package. Like it's sitting at the end there. But for most, all you need is half an Oreo, and you'll actually give the brain what it needs in terms of that rush, because in high periods of stress, your brain is also diverting blood flow away from the cerebral cortex, which is our thinking, our cognition, our rationalization, our decision making, and it's diverting it down into your limbic, your kind of reptile brain, your stress, your fight or flight symptoms. So even just knowing how much of a bad thing can I have that's going to help me with my stress is sometimes a good starting point, right? So no, Sim, it's not at the end of the entire package of Oreos. You just need a half of an Oreo and you'll feel a little bit better. Versus for me, in my mind, it's like, I just need to eat something because I'm stressing. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of it is also your narrative. So the way you talk about stress and the way you relate that back to food. So I often, kind of like Crystal was saying, is when I'm in high periods of stress, I don't eat a lot. It shuts off for me. But if it's like stress that's ongoing and I know I can manage it, it's almost the opposite, where I need to fuel myself and I'll just munch and pick and just continue eating. So just knowing your own habits, and then knowing that in increased periods of stress or increased perception of stress, it's really a humanistic type of behavior to revert back to old habits. So even if you were doing really well, and right now with all of these changes, your digestion is not working all that well, and it is related to food or stress or other sort of areas, that just sort of adapting that emotional side to say it's okay where I am right now. Find permission to feel is so important in the times that we're at, because otherwise your gut can really feel that strength, that anxiety, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know, but for any of you, when I get really stressed, I get hinges in my stomach, like almost like tight pain.
Yeah, but that's almost like you're just referring back to the mind gut connection, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
My
stomach, or like, I don't know, think about like the thrill of a roller coaster and you feel your like stomach is going to do a flip flop almost, right? It's that's almost like how strong that connection really is between the mind and the gut. Right? But yeah, I mean, this is awesome. Like, I'm just going through the list of questions that we've had, and actually one thing that came up, and again, like, I'm relating so much of this conversation back to sort of my own habits, right, when it comes to digestion. And one thing I've always come back to is if my stomach is upset, or, you know, some of the stuff that we were talking about, like gurgling, or if it's really tight, I find for me, green tea has been my saving grace. And I don't know why. I just know when I have a hot cup of tea, not coffee, not orange, whatever, it's pico, whatever it's called, it's green tea that usually does it for me. So I don't know. I mean, let's just talk about what things we find help us the most when it comes to our digestion. And let's just start off with some green tea. So I'll leave it to the experts on our panel right now. You guys let me know why green tea is so helpful for me. Or is that just
I think that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think everybody has something that they go to, right? And there's also, like, Crystal, I'm so glad you mentioned what you've used with your kids, because sometimes we need to actually parent ourselves. Like, we need to recognize how to use strategies that we might have used as a kid or for our kids, and we forget that we have to care for ourselves in that same way. So before I kind of get into various herbs that we could use or teas that we could use, I'd love to hear from everybody. What are some go-tos when you're kind of feeling like things are unsettled in your digestive system, or you're just not feeling the best there? What are some things that you've used, or maybe that have been passed down from grandma? What has grandma been using? Tell us a little bit about those remedies that you've used.
Ginger ale and black pepper has been a common one in my house.
I'm like,
really?
Say that. Yeah. Oh, that's what our mom used to do.
Ginger ale and black pepper for the win for any digestive issue.
If our stomach hurt, that is the number one thing that we would get, with ginger ale and some black pepper.
Or she would make me chew ginger, chew it.
Yeah.
Such a good one. Can I just pause us right now for a quick, just to include everybody else in the conversation as well? I would love to hear on Instagram and Facebook, what are some things that you guys use to help you with your digestion? And if you're too shy to tell us what you use, tell us what a friend of a friend uses, or what your kid uses, or what your mom's always told you to do. All right, back to you guys.
I really like ginger. There's one particular thing that my mom got me hooked on from a young age, and it's called ginger drink, and you can usually get it in like the international aisle of the grocery store, and it's like this green box, like this big, and they come in like little tea sachets, but it's actually like dehydrated ginger. Like it's kind of like powdered ginger, but they're like in little clumps. And then anyway, you take that whole packet, and if you use a larger mug, it's better, because then it's a little bit more diluted, because it's quite a strong flavor. This is definitely for people who like ginger, who don't hate the taste of ginger, because it's very strong. But I find if I drink that as it's cooling down, like my stomach feels better right away. Like it's always worked really well, especially if you add a little bit of honey or like a wedge of lemon in there too.
Oh, now you're getting fancy. Awesome. That's great.
I know.
The potion.
Yeah. Joe, I feel like you've got a lot of these.
I
don't know why.
Joe's mom has a lot of these.
My mom definitely does have a lot of this. I think it really does depend. Like if it is digestive issues because of stress, then I actually lean into the entire fight or flight response, and I use my body. So I go for a good workout. Nice. I go for like a good run, something that really kills me. Like I'm gasping for air. And then I actually do a yoga routine. So if you are just me just now, please just know I do not love yoga. I appreciate it. I respect it. I know that it does, but if you see me doing yoga, things are bad. Things are so I would do that. And there's a lot, like Robin would say, like the twists and the turns and everything else. It really does get things kind of like moved. And it allows me to close that loop. So if when I'm in a fight or flight response, then all my muscles and all the blood is going towards my large muscles. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to burn that up. And then it allows me to reset a little bit more. If I'm eating and it's digestive issues because I have overate, and it is not anything stress-inducing or anxiety-ridden or anything else, then hot water and lemon.
Nice.
Yeah, I do drink it on a regular, so that is something that, like, it's. I just do it regularly at this moment in time. And in my family, for some reason, we always drink hot water by itself, and it gets to the point where when I'm in a restaurant, I'll be like, I'd like a glass of hot water, and my friends will mock me, and now they do it too. So that's just fine. Yeah. And then, like someone was making fun of me, yes, my mom does have a lot of things that she does in terms of digestive stuff. There is this one thing, it's a Nigerian herb. I'm not sure what it is in English. We call it jeji medicine. It is basically every green plant made on earth put into like a jug with water, and then it sits there for like a day, and it has to be lukewarm. Then when you drink it, you will go immediately. Like you will cleanse everything from your soul. Like everything is coming out. So I haven't had that in a very, very long time. Like, I can, like, even talking about it, I can smell it. I'm getting flashbacks, PTSD, the whole shebang. But, like, it is very, very effective. And, like, we'll actually talk with my mom after this just to figure out what it is. And hopefully I'll have answers for people who want to know what it is after.
Oh, now we're all curious.
Yeah, totally.
You have to try this now.
Yeah, because you say it's a mashup of a whole bunch of herbs and it's been there for a day, like, just sign us all up. We want to
Yeah. And then the last thing, and I'm sure like Dr. Lewis and Noreen can talk about this, magnesium as well.
Yeah.
So like, when that's like just step by step and stuff like that, like that's what I would do. And sometimes that's what I would tell or ask patients, hey, maybe take a look at this, talk with your naturopath, dietitian, go from there. Yeah.
That's great. Chris, what about you? You told us about
similar to you, Joe, actually. yes, massage.
Great.
For the girls, I used to take their legs and just move their legs around, their tummies and all that good stuff, right? So massage, and I find myself doing it often. Like I'll lift my arms up and kind of stretch out my gut. But similar to what you were saying, Joe, warm water is a huge one in our family. I've taken on drinking warm water and apple cider vinegar every single morning now. And that's something that my dad actually has been doing since the dawn of time. So I've taken up that behavior as well. And I noticed that it does help me. It makes my stomach settle. And I drink that as soon as I wake up. And I really like that for my digestion.
Great.
I don't know how you do it. I find apple cider vinegar just gross. I can't.
And I love it. I even the smell. It probably reminds me of my dad.
I also use some visualization. So if I'm really having some difficult times, I'll just sort of try to visualize the track. Not that I have a good idea of what it looks like anyways, because I'm in psych therapy, so it's different. But I'll envision like my little choo-choo train and the fact that it needs help and that it's just chugging on its way, and sometimes just deep breathing through it. Because I find if you're straining and you're just sitting there trying to go, it just adds more stress, and that's the very thing you don't want. And so really just even taking some time to do some relaxation has been helpful, whether that's through stretching, yoga, or even just breathing and visualizing what you need to happen might be helpful.
I love that you mentioned that, Sim, because my mom and I do a similar thing. Because I'm sure everyone's familiar with the term peristalsis here, and how that's the term that describes the movement of the tissue as it pushes everything along. And what's really funny is that my mom and I both picture that movement. You'll just envision the little just like in your esophagus and in your intestines, both doing a little peristalsis move, just like the little wave. I just envision that. So I just thought of that when you mentioned the choo-choo train. I thought that was cool.
I love that. Your hand doing the wave was very relaxing, Robin.
Yeah, it was.
Agreed. I was like, oh, yes.
I was like, do it again. I like it.
My wrists are so flexible.
That's wrist right there. All right, Noreen. All the tips.
Well, for me personally, aniseed has always been my family's remedy. So anytime we had upset stomachs, my mom would make hot water with aniseed in it. What's that?
What is that? What did you say?
Like star anise?
Fantasy.
Star anise.
That's what I heard too.
ANISE.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Anise or anise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is called yensun in Arabic. So it's like a hot tea basically that you make with it. If you haven't tried that, I would highly, highly suggest it because it's really tasty. It's a seed.
Everybody take notes. Take notes.
Doesn't it kind of taste like licorice, Noreen?
I don't know. I don't love licorice and I really like it. But yeah, I could see how it kind of has a similar, it would be on the same sort of trajectory there. But really helpful for just soothing an upset stomach or just feeling a little bit uneasy, or if you have eaten too much and you just feel like something needs to settle. That's my own personal one. Ginger ale for sure. My mom used to just take take all the bubbles out of it.
Yeah.
And then I drink it, which took all the fun out of it. So I wasn't too impressed. Those are mine. And then, yeah, there's a ton of like food related and like Dr. Lewis was saying, like herbal remedies for digestion. Just kind of depends on what the issue is, right? Like we've talked a lot about lower GI issues, but then you have the whole spectrum of upper GI and, you know, so there's so many things that can help soothe depending on where in your gut your issue is. But deep breathing for me, aniseed, caffeine's a pretty good stimulant if if needed, as long as it's not impacting somebody in a negative way. Like if stress is through the roof and coffee's making it worse, then I probably wouldn't suggest it. But if someone drinks coffee in the morning and it helps them use the washroom, I'm not really one to say you shouldn't be drinking that, because it's, you know, if it's helping you go, I'd rather you go than not go. Yeah, so those are my personal ones.
Cool. Great. Wow, that's such a beautiful array of different things. I think we always think that like we've got just a part 2 scheduled for this webinar. I mean, for this live, and we could again go forever with it. I'm going to give you really quickly a few herbs that are kind of the kind of go-to ones depending on what the issue is. And then Noreen and I are actually going to be doing a full digestion webinar next week. And that's totally for free to our community. So we'll send out much more. We'll spend a lot more time on some of these strategies. But just in case someone's having some trouble tonight and needs some things tonight, besides what we've talked about so far. So we've talked about ginger, green tea, a lot of antioxidants in both. And ginger has this anti-spasmodic quality, so it helps to really settle any cramping that you might experience. Anise, very similarly. Fenugreek is another really big one that's typically used in Indian culture in cooking, as well as can be used as a tea. Similarly, cardamom. A lot of these that we're talking about can be used as a food, as well as a tea. So you can feel free to kind of cook with it. Turmeric's another one. These are just kind of coming to me as we talk. Turmeric's another one, right, as a herb used in cooking, but also can be used as a tea. And then just mostly herbal teas. My go-tos a lot of patients will use are chamomile and mint teas. Those tend to be really kind of calming for the system. And that works both from a strictly digestive standpoint, but also helps with calming your system from a stress standpoint. So we call them nervines in naturopathic and herbal medicine. So it helps to kind of calm the system down. You can have it before bed. You can also have it throughout the day to help with anxiety or stress and to help with settling your digestive system. And then in terms of nutrients, we talked about magnesium. Magnesium, again, is one of those crossover therapies that can be used to help with stimulating bowel movement. So you wouldn't want to take it if you're already more towards a fast transit time. You'd want to take it, maybe consider it anyways, for constipation, but it also helps with stress and helps with anxiety. So that's a really nice one that, if you're trying to be efficient with your supplements, you could try that. And then we've also talked about a lot of different lifestyle strategies, right? Like deep breathing, abdominal massage, exercise, slow-paced as well as fast-paced exercise, depending on what your system needs. Those are some really great ones, and definitely like in the toolbox at a very foundational level before you start getting fancy with more individualized therapies. So hopefully those all help our audience.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was, and I know we have so many more questions, but we're already pushing the hour on this. So
yeah,
I guess some of these questions we're just going to have to address in your webinar, right? So we'll wait eagerly for that. But anyway, thanks for joining us, everyone, to, our One Elephant staff, and then all of the audience on Facebook and Instagram as well. So
Thank
take
you.
care. Have a good night.
Bye.
Great talk, guys.
Bye.
Have a good night.